This video is brought to you by War Thunder. Play with me this weekend. Details in the description. I remember many years ago when I first saw this jet and I thought, wow, Japan has finally bought the F-16. But that was far from reality. Although very similar on first sight, the F-2 and the F-16 don't share as much as you would like to believe. To understand this story, we've actually got to go back in time to the late 1980s and the procurement program of the new fighter for the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. Japan was in a predicament. They obtained the F-15Js from the United States and had a very potent air superiority fighter, but they lacked an adequate support fighter, as they like to call it, or a multi-role aircraft that could perform both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions. Encouraged with the local assembly of their own F-15s and development of their previous aircraft, the F-1, the Japanese thought that maybe they could just do it themselves. They were certain that they could develop an indigenous fighter and strengthen the domestic aerospace industry. Two initial proposals were made. The first from Mitsubishi was a Delta Wing plus Canard configuration, and Kawasaki came with their F-18 Hornet lookalike. But pretty darn quickly they've realized that this task was going to be A, extremely expensive, and B, simply unrealistic because they lacked the technology and experience. So they opted for cooperation with a willing partner to jointly develop this new aircraft. Europe was ready to offer the Tornado, but that wouldn't really fit in with the role that Japan wanted, and the Pentagon, monitoring this development, saw an opportunity to offer the Japanese joint development of a fighter based off the F-16 or F-18. But there was a third contender. Now, around the same time, General Dynamics was actually offering a variant of the F-16, called the Agile Falcon, as a cheap alternative entry into the Advanced Tactical Fighter program, the same program that would eventually deliver the F-22. Thus, this F-16 variant was found to be unsuitable for the US Air Force. But it was more than suitable for Japan. And that's where our story starts. Before the F-2, Japan's premier fighter jet was the F-15J. It suited the needs of the Japanese defense and was considered one of the best fighter jets in the world at the time. And it does make you wonder what it would be like to fly. Well, in today's sponsor, you can. War Thunder, the most comprehensive free vehicle combat game ever made. And boy, do they have a ton of machines, from biplanes, interwar tanks, to battleships, jet fighters, to modern main battle tanks. You can select over 2,500 playable vehicles, and let me tell you, that's a lot. And each of these machines is accurately modeled, so the damage is real, with engines, fuel tanks, and even pilots being susceptible to damage like real life. And a cool X-ray model showing each hit that you've had or dealt. There's also a great customization and different game modes for every player, from arcade to realistic, and there's now an even new mobile version that's even better to play on the go. And my favorite part about War Thunder is the sheer chaos that we have when we all play together on the Found and Explain live streams, with many people bringing together different aircraft and tanks into pure chaotic fun. And the best part of all of this is to play with me this weekend and 70 million other players in epic PvP competitions. You don't need anything fancy, as War Thunder is free for PC, consoles, and even mobile devices. And I'm not coming empty-handed. If you use my code in the description or the pinned comment, new and returning players on PC and consoles that haven't played in the last 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's available for a limited time only, so be quick. Mitsubishi as a name is often linked to the Lancer evolution, but they were well versed in aircraft development, and their A6M0 became one of the most prominent fighters of aviation history. But of course their more recent track record included the F-1 attack aircraft, so they were chosen to lead this new program to build the successor. With the groundwork already done by General Dynamics, the Mitsubishi F2 would be built on the base of the F-16 Agile Falcon, but with significant differences in electronics and avionics. Compared to a regular F-16C at the time, the F2 had a 0.5 meter longer fuselage, which is really not much, but it had a 25% larger wing area, which is a lot. Larger wings meant there was room for 2 more additional hardpoints for weapons, and the maximum takeoff weight rose to 22 tons compared to 19 tons on the F-16. And what do you do with these 2 new hardpoints? Well, you can either add additional fuel tanks or 4 domestic ASM-1 or ASM-2 anti-ship missiles. This also meant that the combat range could be significantly increased over the F-16 as well, some 25%, which is quite important for an island-based country such as Japan. The tailplanes were also slightly larger, and a drag chute was introduced, unlike the US F-16 variants. The engine powering this aircraft is also the same as the F-16 Block 50, a General Electric F-110 with 131 kilonewtons of thrust, while using an afterburner, which makes it even more impressive that this aircraft had the same engine as the F-16, but it had such a better performance. The nose of the aircraft would also be slightly longer and wider to accommodate a new radar, but we'll get back to that in a minute. And why stop there? The canopy also keeps the great visibility of the F-16, but now it's in 3 pieces instead of 2, meaning better sturdiness and resistance to bird strikes. The cockpit was updated with large LCD screens, and just like the original, the plane features fly-by-wire controls with an analog backup system in case of failure. And overall, much more composites were used in construction, which lowered the weight due to the increased wings and helps decrease the radar signature. And on the topic of radar signatures, the nose, the leading edges, and the intake were all made with a special Mitsubishi-developed radar-absorbent material, which is apparently very top secret, to help further reduce the already low radar signature of the F-16 design. In total, 95% of the elements and drawings were changed on the F-2 compared to the original fighter aircraft, and it pretty much today is its own unique aircraft. But the key feature of the F-2 was its radar. The JAPG-1 was the world's first AESA radar on a production aircraft, even before the F-22. And this is a big deal. AESA radars are a game changer and feature on every modern aircraft, especially 5th-gen jets. They have a much faster scanning capability than previous PISA radars, LPI mode, amazing jamming capabilities, and the Japanese were the first to introduce it. Now, it's important to note that this aircraft was optimized for low-level flight and anti-ship missions, because that's where the biggest threat to Japan lies. But this means that it does lack some important features of modern multi-role jets, especially when you compare it to a modern F-16 variant. It was never intended for SEAD missions, for example, and it can't carry AGM-88 HARM missiles. Furthermore, due to the Japanese constitution, it was banned from using standoff weapons such as cruise missiles. Japan is not part of NATO, and the F-2 doesn't have access to the NATO Link 16, limiting its network-centric activities. Pilots also don't have helmet-mounted displays available, and initially it lacked targeting pods, although they fixed this later with a sniper pod. And bringing this aircraft to market was a rocky road as well. Due to the Toshiba Kongsberg scandal, where important technologies were sold to the Soviets, there was a vocal opposition in the States against the transfer of technology and joint development with Japan. They just didn't trust them. But the project's savior was Ronald Reagan himself. He was pressing for arming US allies all over the world and helping them fight in case of war with the evil empire, as he called the USSR. However, despite the project being announced in 1987 and all of his efforts, in 1989, George W. Bush Sr.'s administration pressed for a revised agreement, where all of the technology developed by Japan during the program lifecycle would be sent to the US, while their access to the equivalent American technology would be limited. The Japanese swallowed their pride and signed this new deal anyway, so the F-2 could finally enter development and production, although somewhat handicapped. but that hasn't stopped it performing one of the most interesting roles in the world of aviation. The Mitsubishi F2 has quite an interesting role as well. In the beginning, it was designated as a support fighter and not a multi-role fighter, because it was made to fight against ships, ground targets, and only then against other aircraft. But it doesn't mean that this aircraft has no teeth. Its main air-to-air armaments are locally produced AAM-3s, 4s, and the new AAM-5 missiles. The AAM-4B is the Japanese equivalent of the AMRAAM, but what's interesting is that this missile was, again, the first missile to feature an AESA Seeker radar in 2010. And treating their fighter jet like a YouTube channel that needs to keep constantly putting out content, they decided to also upgrade its anti-ship missiles in 2016 with the new ASM-3. It's a completely new supersonic ramjet-powered anti-ship missile, which is planned to have a range of over 400 kilometers, and would be able to attack not only ships, but ground targets as well. Now, you're probably wondering at this point in the video, how successful was the F2 aircraft? Because it sounds amazing, and with all this crazy Hello Kitty Japanese technology incorporated into it, it must be one hell of a fighter. Well, the F2 production numbers were initially aiming for over 140 airframes, but in the end, only 94 serial aircraft were built, with a production split 60-40 between Japan and the US. And it's also important to note that Kawasaki wasn't left into the dust, but they ended up being part of this project, and they were tasked with building a mid-section of the fuselage. But all good tales must come to an end, and the last F2 rolled out of the production line in 2011. Although there was a proposed F2A variant, which would also feature conformal fuel tanks and other updates, Japan ended up buying the F-35 instead for their new fighter, which is, well, quite understandable. You see, a disaster struck the F2 program and Japan as a whole in the 2011 devastating earthquakes and tsunami, where 18 airframes were damaged. While 13 of those were later repaired and brought back into service 4 years later, 5 of those airframes had to be written off. But like that famous saying, no good plan survives contact with the enemy. And the Viper Zero had several quite interesting encounters in 2013 when Russian jets entered the Japanese airspace and F-2s were scrambled to intercept. Those were Su-27s, and the F-2s made several intercepts that year with the pilots taking pictures of the Russian jets. In another incident, they intercepted a Russian Tu-142 maritime aircraft in the south when the Russians entered Japanese airspace. Overall, the Mitsubishi F2 is one damn good looking jet, and it's a shame that it was never produced in larger numbers. But it will keep protecting Japanese skies for years to come, since it was planned to retire sometime in the 2030s. Hey, and before you go, be sure to check out today's sponsor, War Thunder, and blow up some tanks with me this weekend. You can play the game now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile using my links in the pinned comment or the video description. Those of you that haven't played War Thunder yet or are returning after a break of at least 6 months will receive a massive bonus pack on PC and consoles, including premium vehicles, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. So I can't wait to see you in the game. Japan is also considering the development of a new generation fighter, as well as in parallel with acquiring the F-35, so it'll be quite interesting to see what they're cooking up and how the legacy of Mitsubishi will continue. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.